Welcome to our first ever NYFA conference. This is online. My name is Lingual and I am from Scape. This program is brought to you by Scape. Our program partners are Singapore International Film Festival, the National Youth Council, media partner MediaCorp, and this is a project supported by the NYFA Seed Fund. Now to start us off this morning, we have Mr. David Chua, Chairman of Scape, who would like to share a short address. Mr. David, please.
First of all, welcome to the National Youth Film Awards 2020 webinar organised by Scape Media and its partners MediaCorp, SGIFF and the National Youth Council. We're also especially grateful to the young filmmakers and industry professionals who are taking time to share their experiences and advice to other aspiring young Singaporeans out there. While today's theme is on emerging trends and the future of content, the common thread that I see is opportunity. Opportunity to co-create or source content from the masses, opportunity to learn the craft with SG Digital Scholarships from IMDA, opportunity to spot future consumption patterns and creation trends, opportunity to bring your content to screen, and opportunity to go international. Our role at Scape is to provide opportunity to as many young Singaporeans as possible. And opportunity is especially important in a time like the one that we're living in right now. While COVID-19 affects our way of lives, it does not dictate the way we live or conduct our business. That is our own choice. So even while you stay at home, this should not limit your creative juices or stifle you. Stories still need to be told. Ideas still need to be refreshed. So create at home, write that story, develop that script. Within crisis, we look for new perspectives and new ways of creating content. The ability to see opportunity in a period like this breeds a resilience that will not only see us through this time, but beyond. We speak of passion in the industry, and the word passion is derived from the Latin word pati, which means to suffer. You've always been willing to suffer for the sake of artistic creation. It drives you and does not falter, whether COVID-19 or otherwise. So I am confident that you will not let the situation dampen your spirits, and I look forward to even more powerful content as a result of your resilience. I'm on the NYFA jury this year and I always enjoy it, not because I can provide an expert critique, but because I'm just your average Joe viewer, the average guy who's looking for emotional resonance and expression through your creation. So I look forward to being blown away by what our 6th batch of NYFA participants have got in store for us later in the year. For those young people out there who are wondering whether to submit your short films, no matter how amateur you think they are, just submit them. It's a safe space to get feedback and to try again. But try you must. It has to start with that little bit of courage and desire to grab hold of this opportunity. Better still, don't wait for opportunity, create it. I wish you all a great time of learning and connection in this conference. Thank you and stay safe.
Now, let me share a little bit about the National Youth Film Awards. This is more than an award platform. We're now in its 6th edition now. It's an active commitment from Scape to provide this as a platform for young filmmakers. By young, we mean people between the ages of 15 to 35. So if you're 35 or below, you're still a youth, okay? Now, this program, this platform, allows filmmakers, enthusiasts to have conversations with each other, with industry veterans, collaboration opportunities, and of course, to showcase your talent and flair in storytelling through your short film. Reminds me of which, do not forget to submit your film to the National Youth Film Awards, especially if your film was made anytime from last year onwards. So now you're going to make yourselves comfortable. Maybe grab yourself some breakfast because we've got a long day ahead, okay? But the program is going to be really robust. I'm excited. All our panelists are. Now, kicking off our very first topic for today, stories for the people, by the people. What do we mean by that? Okay, we'll be discussing what crowdsourcing means for content production and what does it mean for you as a writer, as a filmmaker, and how do we navigate in this landscape, whether you're just starting out or you've been in the industry for a while now. And we will also share with you, at least the panelists will be sharing with you, what are some of the resources that are available. So John will be sharing more on that later. Let me now introduce the speakers to you. If you can look at your screen, we have Dexter Ong, Head of Asia, Wattpad, William Puan, Executive Director from the Singapore Book Council, Kevin Ho, Assistant Lead, Audience Content from MediaCorp, and Kane Wheatley Holder, Vice President from the Screenwriters Association. Moderating all our sessions for today is John, candidly regarded as the pioneer independent producer who's still around for the past 20 years. As an educator, John firmly believes that the next generation of content talent is in producers. So do look out for his film as well. It's going to be released soon. Singapore's first creature monster film, Circle Line. Now, over to you, John.
Thank you. Top of the morning. Good morning, everybody. It'll be a nice day of discussions and chit-chat with industry friends and family. We kick off today's discussion with crowdsourcing, Wattpad, screenwriting, Singapore literature. I think they are all very, very interesting topics that can be intertwined together. So without any further ado, let me just maybe speak a bit about the speakers. Dexter Ong. Dexter Ong is the head of Asia for Wattpad Studios, and Dexter is in charge of actually, linking up business with the creatives for Wattpad members and also Wattpad writers. We also have William Puan, which is the executive director of the Singapore Book Council. Singapore Book Council has always been a lobbyist and a supporter for Singapore literature. We also have Mr. Kane Wheatley Holder. Kane's a head scriptwriter for production house Big Three Media, but he is also the vice president for the Screenwriters Association of Singapore. We'll also get to hear a bit and also a case study from MediaCorp with Kevin Ho. Kevin is the assistant lead for MediaCorp's for MediaCorp's content strategy for English language channel. We might find Kevin familiar because he is actually one of the ones that actually commissioned our work. So without further ado, let's really talk about the seeds and the origins of actually creating stories on the web and actually monetizing them. Perhaps Dexter could actually, tell us a bit about Wattpad.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just a bit about Wattpad. We are a global entertainment company. We operate the largest online social storytelling platform that has about 80 million users around the world. And you're able to read and write across any genres on our platform. So far, we've been in operation for 10 years now, more than 10 years. We have about more than 500 original story uploads on our platform. And really what we believe is that today, the traditional publishing or writing process can be a very solitary, lonely affair. You can write your manuscript on your computer, you can publish it on a blog, but that is really quite a lonely affair in the sense that you would have to write a manuscript, give it to an editor, the editor would probably read it or not read it, and then you get rejected, and it really doesn't go anywhere further. What the platform we provide is a social network in itself that allows you to get your audience, get your following, put your draft out there and get some reaction or engagement to then essentially see if it actually is trending. And what we do is that we are able to actually then use that data and be able to identify and curate stories that we can then share with our publishers and our entertainment partners to then get them made into TV productions, movies, or even published as books.
How would somebody actually kind of like sign up on, Wattpad? Do I just go in and sign up as a member and start writing?
Yeah, you can. You can just sign up. It's free to sign up an account. You can sign up. You can write. You can just read. You don't have to write necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can create your own profile. It's basically like Twitter or any social network like YouTube or Instagram, but it's more about stories, right? So you can create your profile. You have a profile pic. You can write 1 story, 2 stories, 5 stories. You can write 1 chapter a day. It's all at your own pace. You can follow other writers. You can comment on their stories. You can read. It's entirely up to you to dictate how you want to experience it.
I might be getting ahead of myself here, but just something that's actually on my mind now. So how would Wattpad actually look at the data and kind of like recommend my story, so to speak? Do I have to so please.
Yeah, I think it's both an art. No, it's a great question. It's both an art and a science. We have algorithms, we have machine learnings, we have data engineers sitting out in our headquarters in HQ in Toronto. So there's a part where our machines are able to identify if you wrote a story today, and for instance, it's really trending among Singaporean users. People are really reading it within that certain specific subgenre or the tags that you tag your story on. our machines might be able to then pick it up as a trending story. It might then get feed through algorithms to come out as recommendations to you. There are other parts where we actually have in-house editors and who are actually reading stories. So they actually read the story to understand what it is about, and they might actually pick it up as an editor's choice and feature it. So there are all those different ways. You as a writer can also share with your friends and community to then get them to read it on the platform. So those are many different ways you can do that.
Nice. And I guess I want to zoom in on a case study which is Kissing Booth, which is something from Wattpad that actually went pretty big and viral. Right? Maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Sure, Kissing Booth. It's a great one because I think everybody can watch it on Netflix if you have an account. It's
right.
on Netflix. In 2018, it was one of the most watched movies on Netflix and around the world. It's it's not a big blockbuster with a big heavy budget. But what happened was Kissing Booth was originally written by a 15, 16-year-old lady in the UK.
Right.
Riggles. It was one of our most popular stories on our platform at that point in time. She then got a Penguin publishing deal, and it got published. It did quite well, and the rights got picked up in the US and eventually got made into a movie. And essentially, you would see that it's not a big budget production, but you will find that there is an inherent fan base for that story that actually, the fan base will continue to support that story, even though regardless of whatever cast you have put in it, because they want to know how it's going to be made as a production. And secondly, I think it being a trending story in itself speaks to the fact that it has a storyline or it has something that's really appealing to a wide demographic, right? So I think those are all great things going for it. Yeah, and this year it's going to be releasing its sequel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, quickly moving to actually how content is actually crowdsourced, how it's actually being amplified and also calculated through an algorithm for, a studio to pick it up. Back home, we have almost the same example because I would like Kevin, from MediaCorp to maybe talk a bit about how did Slow Dancing, which is, one of the Wattpad stories, was actually spotted, I guess, and also made into a television series. So Kevin, maybe you could talk to us a bit about how this synergy has happened.
Sure. I think to give maybe a bit of context, I'll talk about how we usually end up getting stories and how we usually end up turning them into series. I think the TV industry is really, or the video industry is really about it's about managing resources and it's about managing time. So there are a lot of stories out there, but we don't have enough time to look at all of them. And as a result, I think a lot of people get a little bit discouraged. They're thinking like, oh, I put my heart and soul into writing this story, and then I wanna put it in front of a commissioning editor or in front of a TV executive, whichever TV executive.
Why you never read my story, kind of thing, right?
And why did you never read it? Yeah, because the poor guy, doesn't have time, and then it's a vicious cycle, right? And then you get more discouraged, and then you do less, and so on and so forth. And then what happened with Wattpad is it just turned that on its head. So first of all, Wattpad, for Slow Dancing anyway, Wattpad first provided this great platform for people to write, get feedback, and be heard. So I think some people write for themselves, a lot of people write for others, and they didn't need to approach a TV executive. They just wrote on this platform, and there was a ready audience who would read and give feedback and show that they were reading and show that they were appreciative. So I think that really helped to encourage a lot more people to write. And then from all of these stories, what happened was Dexter and his team and the robots got on the stories, and then they presented it to us with a slate of, I think it was something like 20 stories a month, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and one of those stories was Slow Dancing. So we took a look at it and we realized that we went in thinking like, hey, is this something that we can commission? And then we kind of got sucked into the story, and then we all just kind of read it on our phones without stopping, just reading it for its own sake. And when we got to the end of it, we knew that, okay, this has got to be something that we turn into a series.
So the idea here is Wattpad almost acts as a credibility agent, if you may. Is that
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
is,
I think it acts. I think from the writer's point of view, it acts as a very encouraging, non-threatening arena for
Mhm.
somebody to write and express his or her creativity.
Okay.
From our point of view, from a TV executive point of view, I guess it becomes like something that improves our efficiency. You know, suddenly I can get 20 stories in an hour rather than just one or two, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Maybe I'd like to probably bring in Kane now. I mean, Kane as a professional writer, after hearing about, Wattpad crowdsourcing of stories and of course, studios like Netflix and also MediaCorp, sourcing these stories from this kind of packaging. What does it, entail, or rather, what would a professional writer feel? Do you feel that this is something that's good for you, or is it sort of almost like a shortcut, that your services may or may not be valued?
For me, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm very excited by it. I think these kind of platforms and this way of working is certainly very different from the past. I mean, I think for most screenwriters before this technology existed, it was a simple case of doing just that, writing in our rooms and complaining about, struggling over our bills and not getting paid for this and that. And then just, pitching it to people and hoping for the best. But now I think because of technology and it's moving so quickly, you could be in your bedroom at 15 years old and have an idea and get it in front of millions of people in a very short period of time if you write that story well and it captures attention, right? So for me, it's I could see some writers being resistant to jumping on this kind of way of working. But I actually see it as a accelerator of success for a writer. Certainly, if you can write something that is so hooky and so interesting to a certain demographic or a certain audience that it gets attention, right? In fact, I think I love it even more because I think it's another avenue for writers to monetize their work and to get their work into other forms of IP, which you can also get paid for. So for me, it's fantastic. And I myself, I'm kind of like in the writer's realm all the time. I've actually even gone on Wattpad many months ago, and I've thought about, what kind of stories would fit here. But at the end of the day, I think for a screenwriter, whether you're a student scriptwriter or a professional, for me, it's really about deciding on objectives. It's about deciding, what story for what platform works the best. Sometimes, obviously, I can imagine when you start writing, you might not get paid for it immediately. So you need to, and it's a long game, right? You have to keep writing. Other ways of doing it is you can also, independently publish. That's another way of monetizing if you're a writer, especially for books. And also, if you're a screenwriter or a filmmaker, web series and things like that, that can also give you a barometer of whether people are liking what you're creating. So for me, it's very exciting, and I totally promote it for young people and even for screenwriters who have been in the industry quite long.
Okay. I mean, when I first heard of Wattpad, my first concern from the professional writing perspective was, okay, this is really, really going to be rather threatening because it almost democratizes the script writing process, right? And, here we have an organization that actually can use algorithms and trending to spot the great story. So what more the artistic writer who writes from the heart and stuff like that. That was my first reaction, which is why I'm actually as curious as everybody, to what this whole digital crowdsourcing and Wattpad can actually promise. I want to bring on maybe William to talk a bit about Singlit. After hearing about what we have on technology and how this really, really can almost empower writers and storytelling, is it something that perhaps Singlit should explore, adapting and also putting Singlit out there for them to be sensed and evaluated, and then later on commissioned?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like an outlier on this panel because when you talk about books, I think a lot of people are just so scared of books and reading and think of it as an anachronistic, archaic term. But I think what I've heard so far from all the panelists is that at the core of it is still storytelling. I think it's the stories that still matter. So I think the book industry or the publishing industry, like film and music, has been disrupted a lot by technology, right? So all the streaming. So now in terms of when we are talking about reading books, it's not just the copy that you hold in your hands. It could be in the form of an ebook or audiobook. So that's what we're trying to do as well with Singlit, is really to promote Singapore literature. So in terms of it, at the core of it, it's still our own stories, our own culture. You know, what we're saying about our communities, the histories or life stories, or even something set in the future, you know, like a speculative fiction. So what we're trying to do is really to help the writers write their stories and help the writers have their stories connect with a wider readership in Singapore and also outside of Singapore. So the form that it takes, it could be, you know, it could be a book, it could be a picture book, it could be a graphic novel, no, it could be an audio book. But what we feel very strongly is that there is a very rich treasure trove of stories of Singlit in Singapore that has yet to be discovered. And I think if filmmakers are looking for materials or looking for stories to tell, there's actually a lot in our bookstores, in the library. They just have to go in, or I guess now you can't get out of your house, but you can go online. You know, you can go to the library website, to the local publishers, or even local bookstores like Kinokuniya, and just do a search for Singlit. And all these different titles and books will just show up.
I think we have to also address the digital native here. I mean, I don't think the digital native browses bookshops as much. I mean, now they'll just browse with one finger on the screen. Is that something that I think Wattpad has considered? Would it be interesting to actually work with perhaps, you know, Singlit and actually put stuff on Wattpad? And I mean, further to that, I guess my main question is, in a very general view, how does Wattpad, for lack of a better word, you know, police things like, you know, intellectual property rights, you know, underlying rights and stuff like that? Dexter.
I wanted to address a few things that was talked about. I think to William's point, I think at the heart of it, we are all celebrating stories and the art of storytelling. Anybody can write a story, but screenwriting is a different skill altogether. So for a 15 or 20-year-old, for a first starter amateur, to write a story, everyone has a story to tell. And it's quite easy to write or publish a story, but to write a screenplay, that's a different skill altogether. But then the other part is also about reading activity. We actually promote the book industry in the sense that we work with publishers like Hachette, Simon & Schuster, we in different countries as well, and we also publish our own books. So earlier last year, we launched Wattpad books, where we're actually doing physical publishing. And we have found that the average person on Wattpad actually buys more books and reads more than other than other consumers. So that's actually really so we do believe in the book industry. We do believe in publishing as well as traditional publishing. And then to your question about IP rights, today if you are publishing your story on a platform, you own the rights to it, and it's a bit like YouTube or any other platform. You ultimately are still the owner of the rights. At certain points along the way, we might have someone reach out to you to talk about acquiring rights or shopping rights for your story. And you are in control of whether you want to work with us or work with our partners to sort of negotiate and sell your rights. But that's also within the way in which you can control the path for that. As Kane said earlier, many people have different ways in which they want to pursue their career. Some people want to be published, some people want to be a screenwriter, some people don't want, it's not about the money, it's more about them getting a bigger audience. And so I think our platform actually allows for all those different kinds of possibilities, and it's up to you to decide how you want to chart that path for yourself. That's all right. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so I hear that the job scope of a screenwriter is kind of secure, which is good, I guess. Maybe Kevin, maybe you can speak a bit about your own experiences as a commissioning editor, and also, you know, I guess you can say spotting slow dancing from a credible, enjoyable story to actually, you know, transforming it to something that's, you know, to be shot and to be screened. What was the process like?
Sure. I think the process kind of follows. I mean, once we've identified the story from Wattpad that we want to develop, the process more or less follows the same process of most of our other shows. I think in line with the discussion about do platforms like Wattpad are they a threat or encouragement to scriptwriters? I think it's important to note that the story is just like the base layer. It's like a car, right? I mean, the engine. You know, you can't say it's all about the engine because there's a lot of stuff layered on top of that. So it's the same thing with a TV series or film. You start with the story, yes, but then you need the scriptwriter to come in and actually do all the dialogue and, you know, pace the thing out properly. You know, not too much excitement over here, not too much excitement over there, nice pacing. You need the director and the DOP to come in and say, I want to shoot it this way. You know, the kind of shots that you use, the kind of editing that you use makes a huge difference to you know, to a film or a series. I mean, you can just take a look at the remakes of some of the old Hollywood classics and you just compare them like 10 years before and then the new version 10 years after this. They look so different, even though the storyline is pretty much the same.
True.
Yeah. So once we get something like Slow Dancing, we look at it. First thing that we do is we grab a scriptwriter and we put him or her on the project. And we say, hey, can you take a look at this and can you work out with a producer an outline, translating the story onto screen. Wattpad stuff, a lot of it is really, really good, but the trouble is it's written to be read off a phone or off a tablet.
Absolutely.
So translate that to the screen, you know, maybe the pacing is different. I can't have so much inner monologue. Characters can't talk to themselves so much, that kind of thing. So the producer and scriptwriters sit down, they draft it into like a story outline first. Then after that, we look at the story outline, we discuss that. Once we're happy with the story outline, then the scriptwriter goes in and turns it into an actual like script.
Does the original writer get a chance to be in this process, or has it kind of like been once or twice removed already? Maybe
the scriptwriter does. The scriptwriter gets involved. Dexter gets involved. The Wattpad team gets involved. They actually have offices all over the world, including in Hollywood. So, you know, it's actually very useful to get their input on all sorts of things, not just in terms of story, but in terms of casting as well. Yeah, so they do get involved, yes.
Okay. So Dexter, the original writer can also get involved in this.
Actually, the original writer actually is involved in this project as well. Noel,
nice.
The writer that's actually based in Singapore. And I think there are a few things that the writer can add a lot of value with it, because on our platform, it's not a physical book, which means that you can actually comment with your fans at a paragraph level. The writer can send notifications, can send messages directly to their fans to engage with a certain scene, with a certain character, with the ending. And so she has a lot of knowledge around what the fans are really excited about and how she has actually been having those conversations with the readers of her story. So those are actually all very valuable in terms of then sharing that kind of data with MediaCorp when they are thinking about adapting into a screenplay. What scenes, what dialogues, what motives does she really care about, and what does she think based on her fans' interactions, what they really care about.
Okay. Maybe back to Kane. So from what we are hearing, you know, there is still that transformative progress that has to be done from a story to script to screen even, right? So I mean, from a writing perspective, does it sound as if adaptation skills are actually going to be something that is quite in demand instead of maybe creation skills?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that going into the future, whether you're a screenwriter or a book writer or someone who specializes in even a blog writer, someone who writes a blog, I think being able to diversify your skills to such an extent that you can adapt different forms is certainly going to help you, not only to get your story out there and get it noticed, but to get paid as well. I mean, I often try to bring that into the equation because that is a big question. It was a big question for me after I graduated, was how am I going to take this skill I have, which is screenwriting, and make a living out of it, make a career out of it. So one of the important things, what for me personally, was to research definitely into how to adapt my own work into various forms. And so at least I know what I'm talking about, and at least I know how to take my story and decide, okay, this story might be good as a mini series for TV, so maybe I'll pitch that to Kevin at MediaCorp. Or this story seems like it will be a great little short novella that I could self-publish and market on my own. And this, another story on my website could be something else. So yeah, I think adaptation is a tough skill, and not everyone. I think it takes time to learn. I would say that to get the basics right first, I think that will still be a skill set that will last you for the rest of your career. Just knowing how to write a script, knowing how to tell your story is important. But it is highly, I would say, subjective as well. What is a good story, what is not? There are some people that gravitate towards sort of called real literature, and for them that's the standard. And there are a lot of housewives and husbands that like other kinds of things. That's considered trashy, but it sells and it makes money and people enjoy reading it, and it's still storytelling. So for me, I don't judge it. I just decide, okay, how am I going to adapt this for a particular audience, and what's the best way of doing it?
It bodes kind of well for writers or creators with the word. I mean, coming back to William, I guess this is something that's pretty interesting to tell everybody from the Book Council to NAC, that there is a outreach pattern that we can actually get people to read Singlit. I mean, if I'm not wrong, the Book Council has been around for what, maybe 40 or 50 years.
Well, 52 years this year.
52 years.
52, yeah. So it's gone through a lot.
There were previous adaptation exercises, I believe, the Arthur program and the print to screen. Would you say that Singapore literature can actually I guess harness this new technology to really reach out? Because we've always known that Singapore has a lot of stories. Our filmmakers like to make their own stories, but people forget that yes, we have so many stories in many languages that are waiting to be put on screen. I mean, what do you think?
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. Actually, this whole process of adaptation has been going on in our media industry for a while. It's just that it's not been very active. I think from the beginning of the Author Asians and the Short Story Project on
Absolutely.
So adaptation of Dave Chua's Gone Case, and also like what you mentioned, the whole Arthur series that was commissioned by the Singapore Writers Festival. So that went on for a number of years, where the Singapore filmmakers as well as animators were commissioned to adapt Singapore stories into short films or animation shorts, right? And they were chosen from some of our best writers like Alvin Saad, Amanda Lee Ko, and Ing Pei An. And they were across different languages. So we wanted to, again, represent a multicultural, multilingual landscape of Singapore. So all these stories were adapted for the screen as short films or animation shorts. So like you said, there's a rich field of treasure trove of stories out there that are ready to be mined, right? So if young filmmakers need inspirations, they just have to go into a bookstore or go to the library to look at these stories. But also, I think part of it is, I also wanted to go back to the point of having that fan base, right? So what Dexter mentioned about algorithms, generating fan attention for some of the stories that are created. But at the same time, a lot of all these books are also popular. So if you want to have an inbuilt fan base and try to build on that, you can look at some of these popular books or titles to be adapted for the screen. And also, I guess this process of adaptation, I think sometimes filmmakers may want to work with a good screenwriter to adapt a story. So they marry their own visual storytelling aesthetics with the literary or the writing quality of the story and turn it into a product that melds the best of both worlds. So it's important to work with a good screenwriter or a good writer to adapt the story for a different medium.
I think that's a good way to actually kind of like pause a bit here to ask out to our attendees. Please feel free to ask questions. On the Zoom panel, you have, I think below there's a Q&A kind of button where you can actually ask questions to us, and then we will probably scroll it and then actually look at the most suitable questions to be answered on the floor. There are some questions. Okay. Let's chat a bit about really the skill sets of a writer needing to survive in the industry nowadays. I would like to pose this question. I mean, everyone knows, story is the base, story is your core, right? That is where you need to hit people in the gut. But further to that, as a professional screenwriter, as an up and coming screenwriter, what are some of the skill sets that you think, a screenwriter should have? Anyone would want to go first? Yes, it's an early morning. Okay, so maybe Kane, Kane being the Vice President for Screenwriters Association of Singapore, what would you advise,
what would I advise? I think for writers, especially young writers that maybe haven't produced a lot of work yet, but have been working on their craft. For me, the number one thing is I think you need to be seen. And I mean, when I say be seen, I mean you need to be seen in the digital space and almost see yourself as a business person or as an entrepreneur yourself. So I always advocate that you set up your own platform, whether that be your own website, your own blog, get your social media accounts going, telling people about who you are and what you do. Because for me, if you in today's world, I honestly feel that if people can't find you, if people can't search your name, if people can't isolate your stories from a sea of content out there, you don't exist. You really don't exist, and there's no reason for anybody really to give you an opportunity. And one of the simplest ways to do that, as I said, is to create your own platforms. So for myself, it has always been building up my own website. It's always been making sure that even my Instagram, when I talk about what I do on my Instagram quite often, it is strategically created to tell people what I do and why, so that I attract a certain audience that, honestly speaking, I can then tap into when I want to get my story to the next level. So you are an entrepreneur yourself, I would say, is the number one thing. I think Jay-Z said it best. He said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. So you are a business. Every idea you come up with is a business, and you can use, whether it's a script, whether it is a book, whether it's an audio book, whether it's a podcast, a blog entry, all of these can be turned into other forms of IP that could eventually sustain you, and you can monetize, and you can make a long-term career out of it. So number one, be an entrepreneur yourself. See yourself as a business-minded writer, not just a writer in a room writing whatever you like. Yeah.
Interesting. I was expecting things like, passion, never say die, daring do.
I mean, that's a give. I think most writers quit because exactly they write in an isolation, they pitch it, and then it gets rejected, and then they feel like their stuff is no good, and then they get disheartened, and they don't keep going. Yes. And half of being a screenwriter or a writer in general, I think, is that you just try to be the last man standing, and you just keep going. And I think if you can keep going, keep producing, keep creating, keep experimenting with different platforms, obviously, you will find your niche, you will find that audience. But it takes time, so don't expect it to be immediate. But definitely keep going and use digital technologies to advantage. Don't see it as a something that's going to take away artistic credit. But use it to your advantage, because it makes it easier for people to find you and employ you. Yeah.
Anyone else from the panel like to add? What are the skills that you think a screenwriter would need nowadays?
I wanted to echo Kane's point. I see a lot of successful Wattpad writers, even the writer of Slow Dancing, and I'm always very impressed by how they manage their own personal brand. You can be writing similar type genre stories as other people, but if you look at, for example, Noelle, who wrote Slow Dancing, she has followers around the world, people who really love her stories, and she has a specific type of even down to the cover design of her books, to her Instagram profile, to how she communicates with her writers, how she responds to them, how she sends out notifications. I'm always very impressed by how she manages her own writing career on top of a full-time job. And I see a lot of these young people who do that. They not only publish on Wattpad, they self-publish on Amazon, they do all these things. They have different Instagram, social media handles that sort of manage that. And I think that in this day and age, there are a lot of tools out there that can help you really do. Firstly, I think there are a lot of tools out there to amplify your brand, to develop your own brand. And then secondly, to also do research around what is out there versus what you're writing, right? How do you build a community? How do you distinguish what you're writing versus other people? I think there's a lot of tools out there. Wattpad is just one of many, and I think there are a lot of other things out there you can actually consider. So that's what I wanted to say. I think there's a question somebody asked about oversaturation in content that we're receiving and quality of stories. Yeah, I mean, I think to take the age-old the adage that there are no new stories in the world, right? Everything is like, I'm sorry, that's a bit controversial to say, but yeah, you can be writing a high school teen fiction with a suicide, murder, drama, mystery. Yeah, somebody might have written already, but how do you, what is it that is different?
Your take on it.
Yeah, what is different about yours? Is it the setting? Is it the characters? Is it just also, how do you manage it in terms of your cover, your brand, your image? There are many different ways in which we find writers are really doing a great job in sort of cutting through the clutter and trying to build their own distinctive sort of storytelling brand or image that I think is great.
William, I'd like to maybe put this to you because, again, books to screen, right? So what would be, from your perspective, a good screenwriter for Singlit or for SingBooks?
A good screenwriter. I think a good screenwriter, regardless of I think would be a writer who reads a lot, actually. So I feel, I think, to add to what Kane and Dexter said, in terms of sharpening their toolkits, in terms of improving their craft, I think it's the same for filmmakers, for writers, for screenwriters, is to read a lot and to expand that diet of what they're reading. So, and it's not just reading Singlit, but different genres, what different writers are writing, non-fiction, poetry, fiction, even translated books, right? To expand that palette and to expand the perspectives, because I feel at the core of filmmaking or storytelling is to transport the readers or the audiences into a different world, into a world that you create, and to create that world in an authentic and believing way. I think you need to know what are the various influences and the tools out there that you can tap on. And I feel reading is really expanding that perspective and your windows, your access to different kinds of windows and into different cultures out there.
Okay. The questions are really piling up, which is a great thing. Thank you very much, guys. I will spare Kevin, the question on the skills of a writer, but I believe that you will be echoing, most of the.
If you like, I can run through them and try to
Sure.
answer as many as I can. So, okay, let me just.
Let me bring out the questions one by one, right?
Okay.
So we have a question here, which is interesting. Tarisha Tan, you asked Kevin, right? How do you get a job as a commissioning editor, or specifically, how do you get good at it and be able to spot a good story? I mean, in true form, almost similar to the question I asked.
Yeah. Okay, that's actually quite a tricky question to answer. The industry inherently is changing very, very fast. So the skills that you need as a commissioning editor keep changing as well. And I was in that position myself. When I was thinking about becoming a commissioning editor, up to that point, I had experience as a producer. And then I looked at the way the industry was going at that point, and I suddenly realized that, in a couple of years, the industry won't need a kind of commissioning editor that sits on all this money and then decides how much money to give each project. It's going to be more sales driven. It's going to be which commissioning editor can spot the opportunity for a show to get sponsorship. Of course, that was back then. Now we're moving in the opposite direction again. But back then, when I saw that, then I had to acquire a different set of skills. I had to join a sales team for a while and then pitch myself as someone who could do production and sales. That's why I should be a commissioning editor. So if you want to be a commissioning editor, I think you need to really study the industry, and you need to look at the trends, where that industry is going, and you need to try and acquire the right skills and hope that they intersect at just the right time. It's quite a lot of luck, because there aren't that many commissioning editor jobs in Singapore. It's a small country. So yeah. As for how you spot a good story, a little bit of it is your own personal bias, for sure. But we try to have a few, some basic rules. I'll just give you one of them. The simplest one is, can I, when I look at this pitch or this concept, can I clearly identify the main character and his challenge and what's at stake? And very often the stories that we're pitched don't have one or two of these things. Like, they have a main character, but there's no challenge. Or they have a main character and a challenge, but there's nothing at stake. And once we see a story with all three, then we're much more likely to say, okay, you know what, let me read a little bit more. It may not be a genre that I personally like, but I know that the groundwork is there for I wouldn't say maybe not a good story, but a story that would appeal to our audience.
Okay. Yeah. We have a question from Sundar for everybody else, and actually specifically for William. This is as singlet as we can get. To what extent can films be considered literature? They definitely have to start as a script or a story, but do you see films and television eventually becoming literature and having them analyzed in schools instead of books?
Definitely. I guess I just want to qualify that when we use the term literature right now, it almost sounds like a very elitist, highbrow kind of concept. But I sort of want to debunk that. It's really at the core of it is still stories that would resonate with us, that would appeal to us. So to have it analyzed in schools, I think I feel it's a way to talk about our own stories to students, to the younger generation, to talk about things that matter to them, things that would resonate with them. So whether we consider as part of the literary canon, I feel that is beside the point. The point of it is, what is it about that story that appeals to us and that would resonate with the generation? There are certain issues that perhaps we should talk about, in terms of their identity, in terms of even trying to to feel part of community, or even through some of the differences that they feel as part of growing up in Singapore, right? So I feel to call it literature, it's a useful term. Yeah, it's a useful term, but I feel more as a point of entry rather than to say that, oh, this is part of the canon, this is very important, we should talk about it, but more as a point of conversation and discussion.
Okay.
Can I just jump in and say there's a logistical reason as well? Like, if you give I think in schools, they're not limited to books and novels, right? They do study plays as well. But the trouble is, when it comes to films or TV series or VOD series, the visuals take up quite, a lot of meaning is conveyed through visuals. And it's very difficult to represent that in just the script form. And then that means that if you want the kids to be able to do their homework, then that means everyone has to be equipped with a tablet to be able to play that, that film. And that's not fair to, the kids who don't have that. So it may not be an elitist thing or whatever. It could just be a logistical thing. Yeah.
I guess also maybe just to add to that, I think for a lot of people right now, the first point of entry into a book is that they watch the film or the telemovie first, right? So hopefully, when they watch it, say on Netflix or in the cinema, that's something that would pique their interest and want to make them to pick up the book and to find out about what are the differences or what are the similarities and what happens throughout the whole adaptation process.
It all boils down to, I guess, what we've always been saying. The story is the base. What we probably are talking about are probably the platforms that can access the audience, the logistical aspects of it, and also the part about where we have to actually grow our own people that are interested in our own stories. We have a very interesting question here, I think, probably for Dexter. Saravanan has a question on the impact of AI usage. So what would be the impact of this, increased AI usage in selecting of stories? Would it actually result in niche genres being sidelined because the data shows so? So he followed on with that to say that, the cinema now is full of superhero movies because data shows that they're the most profitable. So is that something that will be escalated?
Yeah, no, I think they're both. There are demand for both types of things. Obviously, if you ask any studio today, they program with different sort of priorities and parameters. They want things that hit the 4 quadrants where it sort of hits a mass market type stuff. They also might want things that might be a bit more niche. If you ask us for internally, like how we think about niche genres or bigger genres like romance, if you think about the way we classify genres, we almost have 1,000 subgenres. I think a platform like ours actually allows people to write, to express themselves across even more niche genres. So you are able to write more freely within even something, or create a new genre that you think might fit your purpose. But we are an open platform that allows for that. But if you ask me today, our algorithms, obviously, if you write a romance story, you're probably going to get bigger number of reads and things like that. But it doesn't mean that our machines, our AI is not trained to be able to pick up a niche genre that is trending. So for example, we have found really great fantasy sci-fi stories because within a certain type of subgenre, we have noticed that people are really finishing or engaging with that story in ways that we don't see in other types of stories. So I think, yeah, I think there's room for both. I think people might want different things, and that's fine. But if today you go on our platform and you're looking for a romance story, yes, you'll find a lot of it. If you want to find a sci-fi story, I think there are really great niche sci-fi stories out there too on our platform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good questions, many questions coming in. We'll probably have to select a few to discuss it on the air. But again, we will definitely try to answer all your questions as much as we can, even if it is after the conference. So please keep them coming in. I have a question here that's interesting. Perhaps I will get maybe Kane to actually answer this. Tan Jun Sen says and asks, right, are there any professionals we can go to for feedback on our screenplays? Is that something SAS could actually do?
Yeah, you can definitely talk to us at the Screenwriters Association Singapore. I think you can. I mean, we do regularly try to engage with students and screenwriters. I myself, I do even on a one-on-one basis. So because of social media, I mean, we're talking about digital technologies, and I think the impression is that you have to go through an official company, or you have to pay like a fee, and then you have to get coverage, which is like the traditional way of getting it. But it's really not like that anymore. So you could find myself, or you could find any of the screenwriters, and tell us what you need. Tell us what you would like to get feedback on. Obviously, it'll have to be on a time basis. I mean, if you give me a 200-page screenplay, then it's going to be a bit tricky. But we can figure it out. And definitely, if you're interested, join the Screenwriters Association. Email us. I think that's great. We will definitely try to help and to help you as much as possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually kind of give feedback too on my Instagram is kane.writer. So if you guys also want to talk to me, you can, and I can direct you to anywhere you want.
It will be flooded. I'm warning you.
It's okay.
It will be flooded. Okay.
It's okay. I'm here to help.
Great, cool, very, very cool. Community helping.
A shout out to Wattpad as well, because I mean, there's a Chinese proverb that says 3 idiots can outwit a sage. So look, there are professional writers on Wattpad as well, and even if you don't attract their attention, if you have 10,000 people giving you feedback, even if they're not professional writers, something's got to be good in there.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
There's a good question here. I want to bring this out. The biggest challenge. Okay, the biggest challenge I face from anonymous attendee, family name attendee. The biggest challenge I face in my script writing is translating Singaporean colloquial speech into something that sounds authentic and natural. Do any of the panelists have tips and thoughts on bringing out the natural Singaporean tone of voice in our writing? Anyone? I think it's a Kane and Kevin question. Yeah.
I have a very quick idea, which is definitely eavesdrop as much as possible. I think you can record conversations. I've done it before secretly on the bus. I would record conversations, bring it back. transcribe it, and then try and figure out the nuances of that really interesting conversation. The second tip I would say is don't stress about it in the first draft, because if you're stressing about dialogue when you're trying to get the story out, you can face a lot of roadblocks. So for me, that's almost like something I would do in a later draft. Maybe the third or fourth, I would say, okay, this is a dialogue pass, and I would just concentrate on the dialogue and probably read it out, run it by some friends, and ask their opinions on it. But if you can kind of like push it aside for that first few drafts, it really helps because you can get the story done, and then you can really focus on it later.
Okay, I have another question from anonymous attendee. Maybe the same person, I'm not sure. I think it's a William question, but again, Dexter, maybe you can tune into. For aspiring writers, is it a viable option to pursue writing books or practice writing in the book format as a stepping stone towards writing screenplays, considering how different the two mediums can be? If you practice writing in one form, will it negatively affect the other? So is writing books a good kickoff? And, you know, would there be any kind of, would the paths actually separate themselves in terms of writing?
I mean, I personally think that writing a story in a novel format is the easiest, it's the most accessible medium, right? Anybody can write a story. You are trained to write a story in English composition when you were in secondary school and high school. And I think that provides a medium that is most accessible for a lot of people. I think screenwriting has certain skill sets and I think there is a skill set involved in that. And I think if you are a person, I think for individual, my advice is you write in a medium that you feel most comfortable to express a story that you really want to tell, right? And eventually, I find a lot of successful writers, they don't write with the intention that it will become a screenplay, it will become an audiobook, or it will become a podcast, or it will become a what. They just wrote a story that they feel most strongly about, that kept them up at night. They just felt like they really needed to share this story with their friends or with their community or with the world. And then that story then developed, and eventually rights got picked up and things like that. And I find that some of our successful writers actually follow that kind of path, really to write the story that they feel most strongly about in a medium that they feel most comfortable.
William?
If I can just add that, I think in terms of writing books, novels, short stories, I think the writers have the luxury of taking time to develop the settings, the characters, the dialogues, and then they can go through many drafts of it until they are very comfortable and confident of it. I think in terms of screenwriting, it's a different kind of skill set because you're writing for a different medium. So you have to think about the different scenes, the characters, and then the setting, the audio, the visual part, right? And it's more of a collaborative process. But in terms of writing novels or books, it's more of a solitary process. But obviously you have to work with your editor and with your publisher. But by and large, it's your own voice and it's your own research, and that goes into the book itself.
Okay. Let's try to squeeze in, with a bit out of time, but let's try to squeeze in maybe one more question, which is, okay, interesting about form. Jordan Alpon, hello Jordan. With the rise of the popularity of short forms like TikTok, IGTV, do you think there is a need to revisit the 2X structure, or maybe have it as an alternative story format?
Hi Jordan. Yeah. Jordan's a good friend of mine. This is a really interesting topic because, you know, this is a primary example of another technology where storytelling is taking off in different ways, shapes, and forms. Now, I'm no expert. I've recently, you know, gone on TikTok and tried to understand why the hell is so many people on TikTok. And I seem to see a trend of humor, of zany antics, of dancing, obviously, all this like hand movement type stuff. So it's storytelling in a way. It's very personalized, though. I think it's based on your own taste of what's funny and your own personality. It's very person-driven as opposed to story-driven. And I wouldn't expect any TikTokers or people in most writing scripts. I don't think they write a script for that. It's kind of like an idea and they go with it and then they shoot it. So in terms of revisiting different structures, yes, I think the idea is maybe you don't have to revisit, but you have to kind of come up with your own structure. I think that's more applicable to these kind of new platforms. You don't necessarily have to follow any format anymore. And to be honest, I mean, if I'm doing a TV show or I'm doing a film, obviously it has a 3-act structure or it has a certain structure I want to follow because of time reasons and because traditionally that's the easiest way to do it. But I think the best way is to come up with your own and see what hits. So for me, it's about experimentation. I would say just throw it out there, see if it sticks. If it doesn't, then revisit it, change your format, and try again.
Okay. Good advice. Okay, let's push it a bit more. We have got very interesting questions and quite a lot of questions. I mean, thank you very much, guys. I think it's really, really good that things are coming in. What I can say from a moderator's perspective is the day is still early, so let's pace ourselves. Let's answer a question about genre. I guess for everybody, from Anonymous, in the Singapore context again, do you think certain genres do better than the others, especially when it comes to what can be shown on screen?
I mean, from a MediaCorp point of view, yes, definitely. I mean, we know that certain genres do better than others when we look at the ratings and all that. I mean, what keeps us from pouring all our money into those genres is we have a duty to engage with as wide a duty and a desire to engage with as many people as possible. So while a particular show that is, I don't know, really the vampire, mermaid, horror, romance kind of thing, someone's going to want to watch it. It may not get fantastic ratings in the mass audience. We'll commission it anyway and we'll put it on screen because, we're the national broadcast. We want to engage with Singaporeans, even if you're in a minority. What does that mean in terms of what can be shown on screen? Niche genres can still be shown on screen. If you're asking about, say, other genres, like going back to that format thing, right? Is there a story that can't fit into the traditional half hour, 1 hour on TV? Yes, as we move into things like MeWatch, which is our VOD platform, you'll find on MeWatch all sorts of lengths, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, and there are a bunch of other platforms as well. Like when you say the Singapore context, a bunch of Singaporeans watching YouTube, you can find all sorts of things there. A bunch of Singaporeans on Instagram, TikTok, and so forth. So I think, it's practically limitless right now. I mean, I've seen all sorts of stuff everywhere.
Is that of a concern for Dexter? Are you looking at the trends from genre, or are you just looking at a good story that has good algorithms?
I think people always ask us what are the biggest genres. I think without fail, if you ask any country, romance is always the biggest genre. If you ask any platform, what are the biggest consumed content, is always the romance, comedies, and things like that. And that's without fail the biggest genres. But I think, speaking to Singapore, I think one nuance is that I think generally Singapore readers and writers are quite global in the sense that they're consuming content from all over. They might write in a tone that is, you might not even tell that it's Singaporean in nature, right? They are reading or writing a story that's written by a North American, set in a high school North American setting. And I think that's sort of the nuance within certain subgenres of romance of what people are trending towards. So I think that's, for me, is what I think. They're not really, if you look at the broader genres, that's sort of how we see it. It's more of the subgenres that you start to see the nuances within Singapore itself.
I think a lot matters about maybe writing and being aware of your target audience, which comes back to what Kane, I guess, was saying. You have to be really kind of like knowing, through who you can access and what you can actually talk about. Let's look at maybe another question from Leon Chiu. Hello, Leon. Leon actually was a NYFA award winner, just to plug it, NYFA a bit. A question for Kevin, actually, and this one is related to the case study that we have mentioned. What kind of stories do you like, and what attracted you to slow dancing?
Okay. It wasn't the genre, I can say that. Slow dancing is a romance. I don't really read romance. What attracted us to slow dancing was, I guess, like I said before, the crux of the story was there. That had main character, had challenge, and at stake. So right off the bat, we knew that okay, there's something here. When we read it, even me, like someone who usually doesn't read romance, we all got sucked into it. That was another thing that flagged it as, hey, this is looking pretty good. Yeah, and of course the numbers didn't hurt either. It's very, very, very popular on Wattpad. But I just want to caveat that and say that Dexter often brings to us stories that don't get millions and millions of reads. Some of them are really quite small and really quite niche, but he brings them to us because he says, hey, you know, I think you might like this, and quite often we actually do. It's a bit more niche. It may not really work for the mass Wattpad audience, but it certainly works for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As for what kind of stories I like, I have a lot of guilty pleasures. You know. I like reading, like, you know, fantasy and science fiction. Sometimes the trashier, the better, depending on my mood. You know.
This is public broadcast, Kevin. So I think.
Yeah. You know, I love watching action films. You know, after a day at the office, you just kind of want to watch someone being beaten to a pulp in a very beautiful way. So.
Fair enough. Anyone want to add? I mean, I think the crux of this entire session is really to, I guess, remind or empower writers that, you know, being the first line of, I guess, defense or offense of creativity, you know, you have to really, really be aware of a lot of things that you can actually do or cannot do. I mean, again, let's squeeze a bit more. We're kind of like over time already, but maybe we can maybe squeeze in maybe one more question. You know, bear with me as I select the question. Wow. Keep the questions coming, guys. I think they're pretty interesting. Okay, this is a classic question which I think has to be addressed every, you know, generation, right? So Viveka Rajasekaran asks, while writing a story from a writer's perspective, do we have to consider the big C word, censorship? What are some of your thoughts? I see smiling silence.
Might have been directed at me.
No, not at all. I think it's a good thing to actually bring it up, you know, from a writing and from a story perspective. You know, yeah, you know, while writing a story, do we consider censorship? And is that even part of the formula? You know?
Yeah, I think somebody else was asking a similar question as well.
Yes.
So, okay, so when you're writing a story, you know, whether it's for Wattpad or for yourself or whatever, I mean, that's something else, right? If you're writing it for yourself, nobody's gonna care. And sometimes those stories become massive hits, like 50 Shades of Grey. You know, for us at MediaCorp, if you're asking about stories that go on screen, yes, we have certain regulations that we need to follow. I think if you they have shifted a little bit over the years in two ways. I think one way is that as what is acceptable by society moves, our stories that we put on screen move as well. We have, for example, the way that people speak, the way that our characters speak on screen now are very different from the way characters used to speak like 30, 40 years ago. The fact that we can have characters like Phua Chu Kang in existence shows that, you know, this censorship standards, so to speak, have moved along with society. Mm-hmm. If you're asking about, for example, how much blood, how much gore, how much sex, and so on can be shown on screen, the free-to-air network is still, I would say, like, it needs to be a safe place for everybody.
Sure.
If you're watching TV, if a 3-year-old happens to wander past in the background, you just don't want him to stumble upon something he shouldn't be seeing in the common living room. However, because MediaCorp has started something called MeWatch, which is our VOD platform, that can be consumed in the privacy of your room. At a time when your kids are asleep, you know, at a time when you can control the audience much better. And of course, we have things like passwords and all that. So because of that, it has broadened the kind of stories that we can tell. So you might have heard about Last Madame, which was our first M18 series for English that's on MeWatch. The Chinese side did one called The Driver, which is NC-16, and all of those went on MeWatch. So because of this new technology, because of new platforms, I think the kind of stories you can tell, it's getting broader and broader as well.
I want to get, I mean, not to put you in a tough spot again, Kane, but I think I would like to hear from a writer's perspective. When you are writing, do you ever really think about, censorship, or do you actually think about your target audience? I mean, we always had these sessions during chats.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
do you think?
for me, the answer is very simple. If I'm pitching to a national broadcaster or a commissioner, I instinctively know there are certain things that I need to keep in my mind. Basically, everything that Kevin just said. I do not expect Kevin to champion my graphic scene or my violent scene when I know it is difficult, right? So for me, it's about the skill set of a writer to be able to know how to write something for a particular objective. For me, is a determination of whether you are a good writer or not. Do you understand? If you are writing, you cannot shift, you cannot be flexible, you cannot understand another person's point of view, which is kind of to show empathy as well. If you can't really have that in your mind, I don't really consider you a writer that has all the skills in place. Because you're still writing for yourself. You're still writing for number one. You're not writing for other people.
Everybody.
And once you start working as a writer, you realize there are more people involved. It's a collaborative effort. It's not just what you want. It's sometimes people are putting their necks and their careers on the line for you. So if I wanted to do something that was not censorship, I had no censorship, and I could do whatever I wanted, I wouldn't necessarily go to Kevin, but that's fair, because I know he has certain considerations he needs to abide by. I would do this on my own. I would shoot the thing myself. I would write my own book, whatever. I would do it myself. So I think a lot of writers probably see it as this big boogeyman that kind of like stops them from expressing who they are. But for me, it's like, no, you can definitely still express who you are. You just have to know where to place it.
Yeah.
And then, so for me, I never had a problem, because I recognize exactly what Kevin has been talking about. And I wouldn't pitch something to him that I know would be an automatic no because of censorship. I would never do that.
I think on that topic also, it's really about how you can actually push the envelope with knowing what your surroundings are. I think a lot of writers have to really consider that also. And I like what you say about being a professional writer. You have to really work the form to actually suit, whatever that you're being given to. I mean, as a professional writer, be it, I mean, even if let's say you are a writer that is, if you're a hobbyist, or if you're just writing for your own, I think, I guess the sky's the limit and more. Okay, we have to end this session because our next session is starting at 12 noon. But let me just round up what I've been hearing. Everyone's been echoing these things. I would like to actually go down the line. Stories are the core, right? Stories will be, the rich insight into, our language, our culture. Writers have to build their own brands, writers have to build their own fan base, right? And also writers will have to read a lot, which is something that I really like. Not watch a lot, but read a lot, and be seen in a digital sense. Okay, thank you very much for joining me. I think we will probably look at more of the questions and see how we can, address them. But I would like to just remind everybody to fill up the survey form. I think Lingual mentioned that too, but also to thank everybody of the panel here. First session sounds interesting, sounds very insightful. Join us for the rest of the day. And thank you, Kane. Thank you, William. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dexter. It's been quite an enjoyable experience.